In all my 372 cycles as a Galactic Union diplomat, I've never encountered a species quite as perplexing as humans. Oh, don't get me wrong. They're fascinating creatures. Resilient, adaptive, terrifyingly creative. But they're also the only species in the entire known universe who absolutely refuse to bring their military representatives to peace summits. My name is Jorax Neel, Senior Ambassador of the Galactic Union's Diplomatic Corps, and I'm about to tell you why that peculiar human habit might be the only reason we're all still alive. Ambassador Neel, surely you understand our concerns. High Chancellor Tx Ul of the Proxima Centauri Alliance drummed her 6 appendages impatiently across the conference table. This will be the 50th anniversary of Earth's admission to the Union. Every other member world sends their top military strategists to these summits. The humans send bureaucrats and scientists. I sighed, my secondary respiratory sacs inflating with mild frustration. Chancellor, I assure you, Earth has participated fully in. It's disrespectful, barked General Krill of the Orion Defensive Pact, his armored exoskeleton clattering as he stood. Do they think their military might is so insignificant they needn't bother? Or worse, so superior they need not engage? The truth was far more complicated, but I didn't know that yet. The Grand Galactic Security Summit was 3 standard weeks away, and tensions were mounting. The Andromedans were expanding their territory again. The Rigelian conflict had destabilized 3 major trade routes, and Earth, mysterious, unpredictable Earth, was once again declining to include any military personnel in their delegation. Ambassador Neel, the Grand Minister's voice echoed through the chamber with the gravity of a dying star. You will travel to Earth. You will discover why they persist in this diplomatic anomaly. And you will ensure they comply with standard protocols for the upcoming summit. And that, my friends, is how I found myself on a transport vessel bound for the small blue planet in the unfashionable western spiral of the Milky Way, completely unaware that I was about to uncover the most hilarious and terrifying secret in the galaxy. Let me tell you, if I'd known what was waiting for me, I might have requested reassignment to the diplomatic mission to the flesh-eating swamps of Rigel V. It would have been less dangerous. Probably. The diplomatic vessel Harmonious Discourse touched down at the New Geneva spaceport with all the grace of a drunken Plavian sky whale. My assistant, Lumi Vex, clutched her data tablet so tightly I feared it might crack. First time on Earth? I asked, watching her 4 eyes blink nervously in sequence. Yes, Ambassador. I've studied their cultural briefings extensively, but she hesitated, mandibles clicking anxiously. Is it true they only have 2 eyes? How do they see depth properly? I chuckled. They manage just fine. Remember, no comments about their bilateral symmetry. They're sensitive about it. The landing ramp extended with a hiss, revealing a welcoming committee of precisely 5 humans, the standard diplomatic greeting formation. At the center stood a tall human female with dark skin and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a complex arrangement. Ambassador Neel, welcome to Earth. She extended her hand in the curious human greeting ritual. I'm Ambassador Eliza Morgan, Earth Diplomatic Corps. I pressed my upper appendage against hers, careful to modulate my grip strength. Humans were surprisingly fragile for a species that had survived 3 attempted invasions before joining the Union. A pleasure, Ambassador Morgan. This is my assistant, Lumi Vex. Lumi performed a perfect human bow, though I noticed she kept all 4 eyes fixed on the humans. She'd been studying too many of their horror films. We've prepared accommodations at the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Morgan continued, leading us toward a sleek ground transport. Tomorrow we can begin formal discussions regarding the summit. Excellent. I'm particularly interested in discussing your military delegation arrangements, I said, watching carefully for reactions. And there it was, that peculiar human response. Ambassador Morgan's facial muscles twitched slightly upward, and one of her aides made a strange choking sound that was poorly disguised as a cough. Another aide suddenly became intensely interested in his data pad. Of course, Morgan replied smoothly. Though I should warn you, we've had this conversation with every Union ambassador for the past 5 decades. And yet the outcome never changes, I observed. The Galactic Council finds this concerning. The Galactic Council, Morgan said with a diplomatic smile that somehow felt like a predator baring its teeth, has many concerns. Earth addresses those we find valid. The ground transport hummed through the sprawling metropolis of New Geneva. Buildings of glass and strange sustainable materials stretched toward the sky, intermingled with vast green spaces. Humans had a curious obsession with maintaining plant life in their urban centers. After settling into my quarters and completing the standard diplomatic courtesies, which included consuming a peculiar earth beverage called coffee that I'm fairly certain qualifies as a neurotoxin on at least 7 Union worlds, we proceeded to formal discussions. The Earth diplomatic team was frustratingly adept at redirecting conversations. Every time I broached the subject of military representation, someone would acknowledge my concern, offer a vague platitude, and skillfully change the topic. Ambassador Morgan, I finally said, my patience exhaustion sacs nearly depleted. Let's speak plainly. The Galactic Council requires all member worlds to send military representatives to the summit. Earth has failed to comply for 50 years. This is unacceptable. Morgan exchanged glances with her team. Not the nervous, guilty looks of beings with something to hide, but rather the amused glances of friends sharing an inside joke. Ambassador Neel, she said finally, perhaps seeing would be more illuminating than telling. Would you care to observe one of our military training exercises tomorrow? It might help you understand our unique situation. My 4 hearts quickened. This was unexpected progress. Finally, I would witness Earth's mysterious military capabilities firsthand. Perhaps they were embarrassed by primitive technology? Or maybe, as some of the more paranoid council members suspected, they possessed advancements so significant they feared sharing them. I would be most interested, I replied, trying to contain my excitement. Excellent, Morgan smiled. We'll arrange transport to Fort Benning at 0800 hours. I believe you'll find it educational. Lumivex's expression mirrored my own thoughts. After 50 years of diplomatic stonewalling, we were about to uncover Earth's great military secret. How significant it must be to warrant half a century of secrecy. How significant indeed. If only I'd known what awaited us. I might have accidentally misplaced my universal translator and claimed diplomatic illness. The military transport vessel touched down on what the humans called a parade ground, a vast expanse of flattened vegetation surrounded by utilitarian structures. I'd reviewed enough military installations across 17 galactic sectors to recognize one when I saw it. But this was not what I expected. What in the 18 moons of Xalax are they doing? Lumi whispered, her translator barely picking up the subvocalization. Before us, approximately 80 human military personnel, all wearing identical green and brown patterned coverings, were divided into teams. Some were attempting to traverse an artificial body of water, using nothing but flimsy cylindrical flotation devices and primitive binding materials. Others were engaged in what appeared to be an elaborate ritual involving passing an avian egg using only their neck-based appendages. Ambassador Morgan, I said carefully, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We requested to observe military training. Morgan nodded, her face perfectly serious. This is military training, Ambassador. Specifically, team-building exercises. A human male with excessive facial foliage and insignia indicating high rank approached us. General Thomas Blackwood, United Earth Defense Force, he announced, gripping my appendage with alarming strength. Welcome to our leadership development program. General, I acknowledged. I confess, this is not what I anticipated. Oh, his facial features arranged themselves into an expression of curiosity. What were you expecting? Combat simulations, perhaps? Weapons demonstrations? Strategic planning? The General and Ambassador Morgan exchanged one of those inscrutable looks again. Ambassador Neel, Blackwood said, gesturing to the chaos before us, what you're seeing is far more critical to Earth's defense capability than any weapons system. We're building unit cohesion. As if to punctuate his point, a team of soldiers attempted to navigate a complex rope structure while blindfolded and shouting contradictory directions at each other. They collapsed in a heap of limbs and profanity. "Magnificent work, Delta Squad," shouted an instructor. "Your time improved by 6 seconds." The fallen soldiers cheered as if they'd achieved some great victory. "You see," continued the general with complete seriousness, "our research indicates that military units who can solve problems creatively and work together under absurd conditions perform 73% better in actual combat situations." For the next 3 hours, I was subjected to detailed explanations of exercises with names like Human Knot, Trust Fall, and something particularly baffling called Two Truths and a Lie, which seemed to have no discernible military application whatsoever. "This can't possibly be all there is," I muttered to Lumi as we watched soldiers attempting to transport water using nothing but damaged pipeline segments and excessive shouting. "Perhaps it's a diversion?" she suggested. "A performance for our benefit?" My thoughts exactly. These humans were clearly hiding something. No species could achieve their level of defensive capability through such ridiculous methods. There had to be more. "Ambassador Morgan," I said smoothly, "might I use your communication facilities? I need to update the council on our enlightening visit." 10 minutes later, I'd slipped away from my assigned guide, a talkative lieutenant who seemed pathologically incapable of completing a sentence without using the phrase "with all due respect." Finding an unattended data terminal was embarrassingly easy. Earth's much-vaunted security protocols were apparently as absurd as their training methods. Using diplomatic override codes that technically constituted a minor violation of at least 3 interstellar treaties, I accessed their military archives. If they were concealing advanced weaponry, supernatural abilities, or forbidden technologies, I would find the evidence. What I found instead was far, far worse. "Ambassador?" Lumi's voice startled me as she slipped into the terminal room. "We should return to the tour before they notice." She froze, staring at the screen. "By the void, what is that?" On the display was an image labeled Operation Silly String, 2079, Luna Defense Action. The image showed human soldiers, armed with what appeared to be children's toys, repelling an advance of the notoriously lethal Azoral Hive warriors, with party supplies, and winning. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen as I scrolled through Earth's military archives. Each file revealed tactics so outlandish, so fundamentally absurd, that they defied all rational military doctrine. And yet the success rates were undeniable. "This can't be real," Lumi whispered, her 4 eyes widening in sequence. "Is this accurate historical documentation?" Before us was footage from Earth's pre-contact medieval period. Humans, besieging a walled city, were using primitive launching devices, trebuchets. The file labeled them to hurl disease-ridden corpses over defensive barriers. The defenders, unable to combat the ensuing biological contamination, surrendered within days. "They weaponized their own dead," I muttered, feeling my primary stomach lurch uncomfortably. Another file detailed something called the Trojan Horse Incident, where humans defeated their enemy by pretending to surrender, offering a large wooden animal statue as tribute, then hiding warriors inside who emerged at night to open the city gates. The file was flagged with a tactical note: basic principle, still effective against 72% of known sentient species. "Ambassador," Lumi said, pointing to another file. "This one's from their Vietnam conflict." The recording showed human soldiers installing enormous sound projection devices in their forest regions. During night cycles, they broadcast horrifying sounds, dying animal screams, distorted voice recordings telling enemy combatants they were doomed, and something particularly unsettling called disco music. Psychological warfare, I noted. Many species employ similar. But look at the effectiveness ratings, Lumi interrupted. They achieved a 58% combat effectiveness increase using only sounds and primitive pyrotechnics. I navigated to more recent files, hoping to find evidence of technologically sophisticated strategies that would make sense of Earth's defensive capabilities. Instead, I found increasingly bizarre tactics. One file, labeled Operation Rickroll, detailed how Earth forces had hacked an invading Proxima Centauri fleet's communication systems during the First Contact War and replaced all transmissions with a single human singing what appeared to be a mating song about never giving you up. The Centauri commander had surrendered rather than endure another hour of the psychological torture. Ambassador Neel, a voice called from the doorway. I see you found our historical archives. I spun around to find General Blackwood standing there, looking more amused than angry about our unauthorized access. General, this is for the first time in my diplomatic career. I found myself utterly lost for words. Unconventional? He offered, stepping into the room. We prefer adaptively creative. You defeated the Zoral Hive warriors with party supplies, I said flatly. Blackwood shrugged. Turns out their exoskeletons react catastrophically with the chemical compound in silly string. Who knew? We certainly didn't until a private decided to celebrate early during the Luna skirmish. He gestured for us to follow him. Since you're so interested in our tactical approaches, you might as well see the current training program. He led us down a corridor to a large room where 24 human soldiers sat at data terminals. On large display screens, I could see what appeared to be information warfare operations. This is our meme warfare division, Blackwood explained. They analyze enemy psychology, cultural weaknesses, and communication patterns, then deploy targeted mimetic content designed to undermine morale and strategic cohesion. I watched in stunned silence as a soldier proudly displayed a crude image of a Regellian diplomat with exaggerated facial features and the caption when they say they want peace, but keep 9 doomsday devices in their back pocket. You're fighting interstellar wars with jokes? Lumi asked incredulously. Not just any jokes, corrected a nearby officer. Tactical dad jokes are our specialty. The worse the pun, the more effective the psychological disruption. As if to demonstrate, she turned to her console and typed rapidly. On her screen appeared a message being transmitted to a draconian outpost. What do you call a fake noodle? An impasta. Like your claims to that star system. The Draconians are philosophically opposed to deception and linguistic ambiguity, she explained. This will keep their cultural analysis division busy for weeks. That's when the horrible realization hit me like a quantum torpedo. The absurd training exercises, the bizarre tactics, the complete disregard for conventional military doctrine, it wasn't a weakness. It was their strength. You don't bring your military to peace summits, I said slowly, because no one would ever take you seriously again if they knew. General Blackwood's expression confirmed my suspicion. Ambassador Morgan found me in the corridor. Imagine trying to discuss serious defensive strategy when your chief tactical officer suggests solving a territorial dispute with a galaxy-wide scavenger hunt. Or when your admiral keeps making puns during crisis negotiations, added Blackwood. Or when someone inevitably asks about the silly string incident, concluded a third officer who had joined us. I felt a cold shiver travel down all 4 of my spinal columns. The humans weren't embarrassed by primitive technology or hiding advanced weapons. The truth was far more terrifying. Their approach to warfare was so fundamentally chaotic, so utterly unpredictable, that no rational species could properly defend against it. A species that would launch plague corpses, wage war with jokes, and dance to psychological warfare music rather than retreat was not a species you wanted to provoke. The Andromeda Collective is planning expansion into 3 systems on your border, I heard myself saying. They believe your lack of military representation indicates weakness. Blackwood and Morgan exchanged glances, and for the first time I saw something truly frightening: humans shifting from diplomatic amusement to tactical focus. "Well," said Morgan with a smile that contained absolutely no warmth, "perhaps we should prepare a special welcome for them." Back at the Earth diplomatic headquarters, I sat across from Ambassador Morgan in her private office. The spectacular view of the Alps through her window seemed at odds with the absurdity of our conversation. So I began, placing my data pad on the table between us. "I believe I understand why Earth refuses to send military representatives to peace summits." Morgan sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Do you really? Your military tactics are so unorthodox that you fear other species would not take Earth seriously as a diplomatic partner if they knew the full extent of your methodology." She laughed, that curious human sound that indicated either amusement or discomfort, sometimes both simultaneously. "Close, Ambassador Neel, but not quite. The problem isn't that our tactics are unorthodox. The problem is our military personnel themselves." She pressed a control on her desk, and a holoscreen activated, showing recordings from various diplomatic incidents. This was Admiral Jenkins at the Proxima Treaty negotiation, before we established our current policy. The recording showed a stern-faced human military officer listening to a draconian ambassador describe a plan to annihilate 3 star systems as part of a defensive perimeter. The human's face contorted strangely before he burst into uncontrollable laughter. "He couldn't help it," Morgan explained. "The draconian plan was so strategically ridiculous that Jenkins physically couldn't maintain composure." Another recording, a different human officer at a negotiation table with the Rigelian High Command. "Have you considered just nuking their ceremonial birth pools?" The human suggested casually. "One tactical strike, problem solved." The Rigelians looked horrified. "Major Donovan was genuinely trying to be helpful," Morgan said with a grimace. She didn't realize she'd just suggested what would be considered genocide under galactic law. Recording after recording showed similar incidents, and military personnel either laughing inappropriately at serious threats or suggesting solutions that qualified as war crimes by galactic standards. "The final straw," Morgan continued, "was when General McIntyre suggested solving the Betelgeusian border dispute with, and I quote, a good old-fashioned dance-off. Loser has to chug a gallon of milk." "I see," I said, beginning to understand. "Your military personnel lacked diplomatic restraint." "It's not their fault," Morgan said, a curious mixture of pride and embarrassment in her voice. "Earth's military evolved to solve problems, not talk about them. When faced with a diplomatic scenario, they automatically generate solutions based on efficiency rather than galactic law or cultural sensitivity." "And the laughing? Try telling a battle-hardened human veteran that you plan to invade their territory by landing troops exclusively on weekdays between 0900 and 1,700 hours with scheduled breaks for nutrient consumption," she replied. "Some things are just objectively funny to us." I sat back, considering this new information. The humans weren't hiding weakness, they were compensating for a different kind of strength. A chaotic, unpredictable approach to warfare coupled with a startling self-awareness about how others would perceive it. So instead of risking diplomatic incidents, we send bureaucrats, scientists, and professional diplomats, Morgan finished for me. People trained to keep straight faces when someone suggests invading a fortress through its sewage system, and who know better than to suggest solving territorial disputes with water balloon fights. I found myself respecting the humans more than ever before. Not for their military prowess, though that was certainly terrifying in its unpredictability, but for their self-awareness. They recognized their own limitations and adapted accordingly. "I will inform the Council that Earth has excellent reasons for its diplomatic arrangements," I said finally. "And perhaps suggest that the Andromedans reconsider their expansion plans." Morgan smiled. "We would appreciate that, Ambassador Neel." As I prepared to leave Earth, I couldn't help but wonder what other species might learn from this peculiar human approach. Perhaps the greatest diplomatic skill was knowing when to leave your strongest assets at home, especially when those assets might suggest solving an interstellar crisis with something called a whoopee cushion.